Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. Yeah!
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'll be joined by chemistry expert Bob Lowry. We're going to go over some rookie mistakes that you could make out there regarding pool chemistry, and these are things that I think will help you a lot if you're just starting out in the pool service business, or if you're a homeowner that just purchased a home. These tips will definitely help you to avoid some key mistakes that you could make regarding some misconceptions you may have about pool chemistry and things of that nature, and Bob Lowry will clear that up for you in today's podcast. Pool Service Pro. Open a Leslie's wholesale account today and receive wholesale pricing on products you use every day. Leslie's Pool Supply offers convenient locations that are open 7 days a week. Another great benefit of opening a Leslie's wholesale account is Leslie's referral program. Get referred to a customer looking for weekly pool service. Also receive priority service, enhanced rebate programs, a discount on your general liability insurance through SPA, a discount on your pool routing software through Skimmer, and an opportunity to co-brand with Leslie's on your social media, website, truck, and more. Save time and money and grow your pool service route and become a Leslie's Pro. Let's talk about some rookie mistakes out there. Now, there's a lot of new people in the industry, or you may be an employee coming on to a pool company, and we'll go over some of the top mistakes I think people make in the industry when they first start. And I think number one, and this is also happening even with the old school guys out there, is not understanding the effects of high cyanuric acid on chlorine. And then on the second part of that, how important the cyanuric acid and free chlorine ratios are. And it's something that a lot of people don't consider. And so they'll have a trichlor pool that has cyanuric acid of maybe 150 or 200, and they're getting algae in there every week, and the free chlorine levels at 5 or 6 parts per million, and they're scratching their head thinking, hey, there's tons of chlorine in here, why am I still getting algae in this pool? So you want to go over kind of this misunderstanding that happens out there?
Yeah, for years we used to just put in 2 to 4 parts per million of chlorine in the pool, and that was supposed to be enough. And then every summer we all battled algae and put in algicides and superchlorinate and shock once a week and all those kinds of things. And we were doing stuff weekly to bring the chlorine level up to where it would kill the algae. We started figuring out what the problem is. And about 8 or 9 years ago, I spent a few hundred hours studying what's going on in the pool. And the good news is that because I'm independently wealthy and independent, if I want to spend 200 hours doing something, I don't have a boss telling me I can't do that. So I studied it to find out what kills algae, how much chlorine we need. Depending on who you talk to, we need only between 0.3 and 0.5 parts per million of HOCl in the water. And some people disagree with the 0.03, but everybody would agree that 0.05 parts per million HOCl will kill algae. So if we know that, then we're able to calculate how much chlorine is in the water if we know how much cyanuric acid is in the water. So we started figuring out how much how much chlorine is in the water. And the fact of the matter is, even with only 30 parts per million of cyanuric acid in the water, 97% of all the chlorine that's in the pool is bound to cyanuric acid. It's attached to it. And it's not like it's not available, but it's not available right now. Only the 3% that is not bound to the cyanuric acid is available for killing anything. That is an equilibrium reaction, 97% and 3%. So if you use some of the 3%, some of the 97 will switch over so that 97 and 3% is maintained. But because we know that 3% of the chlorine is doing the work, we can multiply the 3% of the amount of chlorine that's in the pool and find out if we've got enough chlorine. So if you have, say, 2 parts per million of chlorine in the pool, if you multiply 2 parts per million of chlorine by 0.03%, okay, well, let me back up. You also may know that when chlorine is in water, the pH determines how much HOCl is made and how much OCl is made. And the OCl minus and the HOCl are at 7.5 pH is about 50%. So you got 50% HOCl and 50% OCl minus. So that means that only 1.5% of the chlorine that's in the water is going to kill anything. So if we take 2 parts per million and multiply it times 1.5%, we get 0.3 parts per million HOCl. And we said we needed 0.5. So if you're keeping the chlorine level at 2 parts per million in that pool, you don't have enough chlorine to keep algae from growing. And it is that simple. And if we put in 3 parts per million of chlorine in that pool, 1.5% of 3 is 0.45. That's not quite 0.5, but it's close. So 3 parts per million might actually work. It's maybe on the borderline. And if you multiply 4 parts per million times 1.5%, you have 0.06. And 0.06 will definitely kill algae. So what I claim in most of the things I write, 2 to 4 parts per million of chlorine that's recommended by PHTA may not always work. And don't believe that if your chlorine level is between 2 and 4, you're good. Because I just showed you that you could have 2 and not be good and 4 and be good. So if you're in between there, it doesn't mean you're okay. So instead of having to do the math that way, we reversed it and made it easier for you to calculate. And so the free chlorine level that you need in the pool needs to be 7.5% of the cyanuric acid level. And yes, that means if you got 100 parts per million of cyanuric acid in the water, you need 7.5 parts per million of free chlorine. It means that. But in comes EPA and says you shouldn't have more than 4 parts per million of chlorine in the pool. That's their rule. And actually, their rule actually never considered the fact that you would have cyanuric acid in the pool, because your exposure to chlorine is less with cyanuric acid than without it. For that same reason, only 3% of the chlorine is available. So you're not exposed to 4 parts per million of chlorine. You're only exposed to 3% of 4 parts per million of chlorine. So the thing that you can do to reduce the 7.5% is if you add borate to the pool at 50 parts per million, you can lower the 7.5% requirement to 5%. And that becomes a much more manageable and easy number. 5% of whatever your cyanuric acid is how much chlorine you need in the pool to prevent algae. And if it goes below that, then you run the chance of getting algae. And we've been teaching that for 3 years. I've written about it now for 8 years, and I've also got a book that most of you have probably heard of called Pool Chemistry for Service Pros. And it's a short book of 28 pages, but we recommend in there to keep the level of borate at 50 parts per million and chlorine level at 5% of that, of CYA. But that book has now been distributed to 13,000 service techs, and they're doing it, and it's working for them.
Yeah, and I would say from field testing and experience, if you want to keep your pool algae free, even with a high chlorine level, like I gave that example at the beginning, a 200 parts per million cyanuric acid pool, not unheard of in California, by the way,
No,
at 6 parts per million chlorine is not enough to keep the algae out, even with borates in there. So with the borates, you would need 10 parts per million. And so if the new guy is struggling with algae in pools and he thinks that, man, this chlorine level is off the charts, but I'm still getting algae. That's the reason, because they don't understand the formula that you just went over there in great detail, by the way, which I really appreciate that. I like the fact that you reversed it, because doing the math forward is difficult for anybody, and using that easy percentage backwards is,
right.
is much better. And then another aspect is the LSI. Interesting, I was talking to Scott Hamilton over at United Chemical about his Hamilton index. And that's another index that you can actually use that one in California pretty effectively because of our high calcium hardness level. But the LSI is pretty much the standard of the industry across the country. And what about the pool guy that probably never heard of the LSI, never thought about it? What would be the problem with someone starting out their pool service business or working for someone and not even knowing what the LSI is?
It actually depends. If he got one of our books and started using targets, he probably wouldn't need the LSI. But if he just started doing pools and he's got all this mishmash of information, um, understand that the LSI is a method of predicting whether your pool is going to be scale forming, whether your pool water is going to be scale forming or corrosive, or what we say is balanced. And it's a method of predicting whether the water will be that way. And you measure, in the old days, we measured 5 things and plugged those test results into an equation and got the answer. And now, with the advent of cyanuric acid and borate, we now have 7 things to check. We most of the time look up the 7 water tests. We look up a factor for each one of those test results and enter them into an equation. And the desired result is to come up with a 0.0 answer. And that means your water is perfectly balanced, neither scale forming nor corrosive. It is important, if you're going to be maintaining the water, to know if you're going to be forming scale or not. And there are various indices out there, and frankly, the Hamilton index is not an index. They call it an index, but it's not an index, and it pretty much does only work in California and Arizona. Most of the other country can't use it. Um, but and if you use the Hamilton index and use some numbers from his index and plug them into the LSI, you find that it's not balanced water. So I'm not a big fan of the Hamilton index, although it's been around for a long time. But just because it's been around doesn't mean it's a great index. But in any case, if you want to follow it, it's better than not doing anything. So I would suggest just using targets as we recommend for everything. And then you really don't need to be using any index. You just, everything is on target or it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't put it on target, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah, makes sense, and I think that's a good answer, because your target ranges, and the more and more I look at it, and I use this example with you. If you go into the bank and you tell a teller, I like to get $100 out, and she says, well, here's 80, it's within range of 100. You're gonna walk out of the bank not quite as happy. And so the targets make a lot of sense, because you're talking about, $100,000, $200,000 investment in some people's backyards with their pool. and you have all these ranges. And you mentioned before in a different recording that if the LSI could be perfectly balanced in those kind of ranges that people are using, 80 to 120 for
right?
alkalinity, pH of
Yeah,
7.4, and it may not even be balanced.
well, you can balance the water so that you have a perfect LSI, but still not have a stable pool.
Hmm.
And that is the problem. And you could balance the pool. For instance, if you had an alkalinity of 140, you could maybe use a pH of 7.2 with that, and have everything else in the normal ranges, and you'd have a balanced pool. But with an alkalinity of 140 and a pH of 7.2, that's only going to stay 7.2 for, maybe today.
Hmm.
Tomorrow the pH is going to be 7.5 or 7.6 or 7.8. An alkalinity of 140 is going to raise that pH like crazy. So um, there's a difference between balancing the pool and making it stable.
Yeah,
And the goal is to make it stable so that from one week to the next or one visit to the next, nothing changes or it changes just a little bit.
yeah, makes perfect sense. Another thing that we've touched on before is, you know, homeowners may not know this because they always are trying to cut their runtime down on their pool filter. That's one of the problems I have out there is they're always telling me. I just had a customer yesterday tell me, "Oh, can you reset my system so it's not running so long because my electricity bill was super high." But I think of runtime of the pool filtration system is one thing that new people don't really pay attention to. They may get an account where the customer has a 20,000-gallon pool running for 4 hours a day, and they're
Yeah.
scratching their head. Why is the pool cloudy? Why is there algae? So the runtime is a big deal, especially in the season.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is that from a filtration standpoint, if if you get one turnover of the pool, and a turnover is an amount of water that's equal to the volume that's in the pool gone through the filter. So, and so it's based on water flow. So if you take the gallons in the pool and divide it by the flow rate, then you will find out what your turnover is in minutes, assuming that your pump is in gallons per minute. So you can determine how many minutes or hours it is to get one turnover. But from a filtration standpoint, one turnover will only give you about 65% filtration. And then if you get two turnovers, it will give you about 85% filtration. And three turnovers will get you about 90, 92 to 95%. And four turnovers will get you 98 or 99%. So what we recommend is that you get three turnovers, because the difference between three turnovers and four turnovers is like 3%, is not worth doing. But you need to get three turnovers in your pool, and you can calculate for yourself how many minutes that's going to be. And all you need to know is the flow rate.
Hmm.
And so you put uh, a rotometer or flow valve right after the pump, right out. I'm sorry, at least after the pump and before it gets back to the pool, to find out what your flow rate is, and then all you have to do is do the math. If you got 30 gallons a minute running through there, you got a 15,000 gallon pool. How many minutes is that?
Hmm.
It's 500 minutes to get one turnover, and 500 minutes is almost 8 hours. And if you want three turnovers, it's 24 hours. So if you only run your pump at 30 gallons a minute for 4 hours, that's not even one turnover. That's a half a turnover. So you can't possibly get enough filtration to have a great looking pool. The other thing is, if you only run your pump for 4 hours a day, that means for 20 hours a day, there's no circulation. And if you have a biomass, a biofilm, or an algae starting to grow someplace, it the that mass, that biomass, uses up the chlorine that's in the vicinity. And if the circulation pump's not on, it used up all the chlorine. Now it can grow like crazy because there's no new sanitizer being brought to that area of the pool because there's no circulation.
Yeah, and I think that's key. The circulation is something that people don't pay too much attention to when they're starting, and it's a key factor for sure. Another thing I think that new people don't understand is the high bather load and how it affects the pool. I know we talked a little bit about that with the Airbnb segment, but high bather load really affects the pool, a residential pool especially, because first of all, they're not as big as a commercial pool per se in most cases. So a commercial pool has 30, 40,000 gallons or more, and you have a little 10,000 gallon pool back there, and you have 8 or 10 kids in there. The high bather load, how does that affect the water chemistry in the pool itself?
Well, the biggest thing is that the chlorine level goes to zero quickly. We hear this from homeowners all the time. I need to keep a low chlorine level in my pool. And I respond with all kinds of answers to that because that's just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping a low chlorine level is a terrible idea. First of all, you got cyanuric acid in the pool, and that's preventing you from getting in touch with very much chlorine anyway. And you should tell that to your homeowners that there's only 3% of the chlorine that you're being exposed to. So it's practically nothing. And secondly, an adult bather has a chlorine demand of 4 grams of chlorine each one. And so I did the math some time ago, and in response to a question I got from someone. And the fact of the matter is, in a 15,000 gallon pool, once you put in 7.3 people, if you had 2 parts per million of chlorine in the pool, it's now 0.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you put in 10 kids, I'm not sure, it depends on the kids, I'm sure, but I'm not sure whether an adult is equal to a kid or a kid's actually equal to more, because I have a feeling that kids actually pee in the pool more than adults do. Um, but in any case, maybe 10 kids is equal to 7 adults. So the minute you put 10 kids in the pool, you're out of chlorine.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a 1 call a week, how long is it going to be? How long does that bacteria from those kids have to multiply and thrive in that pool till you get back and put some chlorine in it? That's the thing that you need to think about. The number one thing that you are charged with as a service guy is to provide safe water. And if you ask a homeowner, they just did a survey. The number one thing that people want is safe water. So you're supposed to provide safe water. How are you going to provide safe water if 10 minutes after 10 kids get in the pool, there isn't any chlorine? How are you going to do that?
Yeah, and so I think the key for that is, even as a new pool service provider, communication with the customer. Nowadays, you can they can text you, and I would let the customer know, hey, look, if you're having a pool party, let us know ahead of time so we can prepare for it, and we
Absolutely.
may be able to leave you, a gallon of liquid, whatever we can leave you after the party to pour in. And I think that's the key is that understanding that you just can't go through your day and treat every pool the same because some pools, of course, no one ever uses them. That's, one of the things you'll run into. But then there are those pools where they're using them all summer long. I mean, I've been back at accounts before where I go back there at 8 in the morning and there's already kids in the pool.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that you just have to be aware of that affects it. And I think the last thing we'll touch on here is the importance of proper training. And you have a certified residential course that you do on Saturdays, once a month, roughly. And they also teach that at the pool shows. And I think one thing that new people don't realize or don't understand is the importance of getting educated, getting training. You know, if you go to a pool show, these rooms should be full of everyone in there, but usually they're half full most of the courses. And I think the importance of education and continuing education is important because you've even said new things come on the industry that you weren't aware of in the past, and you have to kind of be up on it. And your tech bulletins are a great way of getting that out there. And I just read the one on pH that you put out there, and I think being educated and learning new things and realizing that things change a lot in the industry, and just learning the basics, is really important.
Well, there really isn't anything that's out there that's a whole course, and that's why we developed the pool chemistry course that we did, because you can go read an article, you can go to a seminar and stuff, but most of those are on a subject, or they just they have 1 hour to discuss pool chemistry, and they just say, keep your pool in these ranges, have a nice day. And you're still left with, how do I do that? I would just say, get educated, learn what you're doing. If you attend a seminar, recognize that the guy is just talking about one subject. And what we try to do is we put it all together so that you understand that if you go to a seminar and some guy says it's okay to keep cyanuric acid higher, you know, he doesn't tell you what it's going to do to pH and what it's going to do to how much chlorine you're going to need in the pool. All he's doing is saying it's not going to hurt your plaster or something. So recognize that listening to a subject is not the same as listening to a whole course. And you really should these days listen to a whole course so that you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think your particular course, I took it several months ago. You go over the gambit. You go over what water is. Basically, you start at the basic, and you
Yep.
work your way up. And a lot of things that we cover in these podcasts, you cover in the class, and they get certified. So they get certification. They get a patch. They get a little thing they can hang. And I think it's important to have that certification and the education. More so your class over the CPO. Not that CPO is not necessary, especially if you're doing commercial accounts. But I think the CPO course does not focus on the chemistry like your course does.
Well, and I used to be a CPO instructor, and I can tell you that the number of pages on chemistry in the CPO manual is about 50 pages. And the book that I wrote that goes with the course is 228 pages of chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have a second book that's 28 pages. So we have 250 pages of pool chemistry, and CPO has 50. I often joke and say, if you want to know how to clean toilets, take a CPO course. If you want to know pool chemistry, come to our course.
Yeah, and I'll definitely give a plug for the course at the end of the podcast. In fact, I'll do that in all the podcast episodes so people can find the course.
Yeah, we do have some that are in person. I'll be giving a course probably at the Pool Industry Expo
Okay.
in September. And we just finalized that like yesterday.
Okay.
And I will probably be giving a course after the Dallas show, the Pool Expo in Dallas. We're probably going to give a class on Friday after the show,
Okay.
in person. And I may give one at the Atlantic City show in late January.
Got it. Yeah. So
My
you're definitely
instructors will be giving them online and in person, whenever they want to. And we now have 6 active instructors that are teaching the pool chemistry certification course.
Yeah, they can find that easily by going to your website, pcti.online, and then you
Yes.
have the courses there. They can also sign up for your tech bulletins. There'll be a pop-up when you go there, and I recommend you sign up for Bob's tech bulletins. They come in about quarterly. Is that about right?
I try to do one a month, but it
Okay.
seems like they're getting farther apart these days.
You're pretty busy.
But there are 15 tech bulletins on the website that are
Hmm.
free that you can look at online or even download as a PDF.
Well, again, I thank you for the time with all the content here. And I think, again, the education, I think, is a key. And then learning as much as you can about what you're doing out there is the key to success in any industry, whether auto mechanic or computer programmer. The more you know, the better you're going to be at your job, and the better you're going to serve your customers, and the better you're going to be at your business. I think the confidence that being educated gives you is the key. And, people say, oh, you don't need a college degree because, you can make more money without it. But with that said, at least a college degree gives you that confidence that you have that knowledge base. And the same in the pool industry. The more courses you take, the more education you get, the more confident you're going to be out there servicing those pools.
Chemistry is something you use every day in every pool. And understanding the chemicals and the chemistry are what you're making your living from. The rest is just maintenance. Anybody could do. You could teach somebody you know, how to check the filter pressure and clean the skimmer basket and the pump strainer basket, how to brush it and vacuum it. You can teach them how to do that in 2 days. The rest of it is understanding the chemistry, but you use it every day. What's the first thing you do when you go to the pool? Take a water sample and measure the things that are in the water and then start adding chemicals. You
Hmm.
need to understand what they're doing.
Yeah, so true. So I appreciate again the time you spend on these.
Well, we'll see you next time, David.
All
Take
right.
care.
And again, I would have to say that Bob Lowry is the premier expert when it comes to pool chemistry in the swimming pool industry. And I think you can learn a lot from these podcasts. You can learn more about Bob Lowry and, of course, all of his credentials at his website, pcti.online. And you can also learn about his certified residential courses that he offers there. And if you're looking for the other episodes that I recorded with Bob Lowry, just go to my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. On the banner, click on that podcast icon. That'll take you to the site where I have all the podcasts listed. And in the search box, just type in Bob Lowry. That's B-O-B space L-O-W-R-Y. And then all the podcasts that I recorded with Bob Lowry will show up there, and you can listen to those at your leisure. And if you want to enhance your business, if you're in the industry starting out, or if you just want to get better at your business, you may want to consider my coaching program at poolguycoaching.com. And there are a lot of great benefits for joining the coaching program, including a discount on your general liability insurance. Again, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. Pool Service Pro. Open a Leslie's wholesale account today and receive wholesale pricing on products you use every day. Leslie's Pool Supply offers convenient locations that are open 7 days a week. Another great benefit of opening a Leslie's wholesale account is Leslie's referral program. Get referred to a customer looking for weekly pool service. Save time and money and grow your pool service route and become a Leslie's Pro.